Welcome back to the show. Today, I want to talk to you about something that a lot of high functioning people, overachievers, ambitious people who create significant results in their life, in their business, in their relationships, in their just every part of their existence, something that they face that's invisible, that's hidden, that very few people in their life have any clue about, which is something that I'm going to call high functioning anxiety. So, what is high functioning anxiety? It's basically a continuous loop of overthinking, self doubt, and just uncontrolled worry that's hidden behind a mask of outward achievement, fulfilled obligations, and just a sense that everything is perfect, everything is great, that they're in control. A person with high functioning anxiety may really seem like they're doing fine on the outside because they seem to be able to power through and get the job done. Yet internally, they often experience a lot of unhelpful thinking, a lot of worrying, a lot of self doubt, a lot of fear. And it really keeps them from performing at the level that they want, from being as productive, from being as efficient, and getting the results that they want. And so what happens is, even though everyone in their life sees them as someone who's got it all on lockdown, inside, it's a completely different story. Now, I lived like this for most of my life. I could power through and get stuff done, but it came at a very high cost to me. And on the outside, I seemed to be getting results. I was proactive, I was social, I seemed very calm, I was meeting deadlines, I looked organized, I worked really hard. But on the inside, I felt this cornucopia of fear, right? Fear of failure, sometimes fear of success, fear of letting people down. I felt a lot of perfectionism. I had a lot of self critical thoughts. My mind would be racing at a million miles per hour. And even though I was getting things done, I was often exhausted, I was really fatigued. And I was constantly afraid that I was going to disappoint someone or that I was disappointing someone. And when I was stressed, I would procrastinate like my life depended on it because it did, because in some way it did. Now, if you're like anything I was, right? This is probably very normalized for you. This is not something you've potentially even dared to admit to yourself, let alone anyone else. And because you can push through and get the job done, you just keep going. Well, what's happening is that you're living in a persistent state of stress in your body and in your mind. And when we live in this persistent state of stress, we're really performing at a fraction of our potential. We're really achieving a fraction of the results that we could achieve, right? And the experience of everyday life is a fraction as happy and joyful and fulfilling as it could be. So I want to give you a sense of what's actually possible on the outside. Imagine if this constant state of anxiety and stress was not your normal. Imagine you had a new normal where you could perform at your peak and actually feel really relaxed the whole time. Because when we live in this state of chronic stress and anxiety, we live in a contracted state. There's a contraction both in our body, our physical body. We tighten physically, but there's also contraction in the mind. And a contraction in the mind really is a contraction of our attention. Our attention gets compressed and focused on the thing that we've identified as the problem. So the anxiety is really the result of a perception of a problem. So if this sounds like you, right? If you're really making things happen on the outside, you're successful, people see you as successful, but on the inside, you feel stressed and anxious a lot of the time, you feel a lot of fears, you may be a perfectionist, you have a lot of critical thoughts about yourself, you're often tired, you're constantly afraid of letting people down, there's all sorts of procrastination happening, you feel overwhelmed, then you might be someone who is both high functioning and anxious. The other thing that happens if you identify with this is that your attention is constantly narrowed. So what happens is our mind can be thought of as this open palm of my hand, which if you're watching this in video form, you can see my hand. It's nice and relaxed. When my hand is nice and relaxed, it's useful. I can put something in it, right? I can use it. I can open doors. I can turn knobs. An anxious and stressed mind, particularly an anxious and stressed mind all the time, is like a clenched fist, super tight. Now just try this right now. Just take your fist, either hand or both hands, and just clench your fist really tight. Hold it really tight. Now imagine holding your fist this tight for about 16 hours a day, every single day. After a while, your hand's going to be just locked into the shape. And a clenched fist is pretty useless unless you're trying to punch someone. And that's really what happens with people with high functioning anxiety. Their mind isn't as useful. It doesn't perform as well. They don't get the kind of results that they want. And it becomes a tight fist that they use to punch themselves repeatedly in the face. Now, you can imagine that a clenched fist, just like a clenched fist is pretty useless when it comes to turning a doorknob and opening it, or opening a jar of peanut butter. When the mind is clenched in the same way, when the mind is so anxious and stressed and tight, it's not very conducive to peak performance. It's not really conducive to growing your business. It's not really conducive to living a happy, relaxed, fulfilled life. We can't think clearly. We can't think expansively. We can't think outside the box and be creative in terms of solving some of the problems that we're trying to solve. And it affects our performance in pretty much every area, our work, our relationships, and even our hobbies. Though chances are, if you have high functioning anxiety, you don't really spend much time doing things for fun. You don't invest too much time in your hobbies. What happens is this state keeps us in a disorganized state in terms of our nervous system. We feel, because we are, in a sense, all over the place on the inside, because the mind is stuck in a state of fight or flight. The body, when the mind is stuck in a state of fight or flight, isn't able to relax, recharge, or repair itself. The body doesn't actually digest food when we're in this stressed out state. So we feel tired, we feel wired, and we feel exhausted from being tired and wired all the time. The tiredness comes from just holding this tension all the time, feeling this tension all the time. And the wired comes from literally simulating a state of fight or flight. Because to our primal brain, it's almost like there's a tiger coming to attack us. Except like in the wild, we could run away from the tiger and then rest and, feel safe in our cave. Here, that doesn't happen. Over time, this may cause a lot of health issues because the nervous system isn't designed to stay in this state of fight or flight all the time. So many people these days, particularly so many entrepreneurs, so many business leaders, so many professionals, doctors, lawyers, even, real estate agents, and whatever it is that you do, chances are you spend a lot of time being stressed and anxious. Chances are this is affecting your ability to sleep. It's affecting your ability to be present with your loved ones or with yourself. And chances are you're always on the go. You're doing. You wake up and you grab your phone and you jump into your email or social media or something. And your entire day is basically spent trying to avoid or run away from this fundamental state of problemness. So why I call this problemness is because to our mind and our body, it really feels like there's a problem all the time. Now that's something that our minds do extremely well, right? Our minds are great at solving problems. But they've done a lot of research into this. What they've found is that we're supposed to, at best, we're designed to tolerate about 30 minutes of that problem state every 2 to 3 days, which makes sense when you think about our evolution. When we were hunter-gatherers, sometimes we'd encounter a bear or a snake or something. And naturally, the nervous system jacks up into a state of fight or flight because it's a matter of life and death. We feel this surge of adrenaline or epinephrine, all these hormones, cortisol, and then we run for our lives. And then we would return to a sense of safety and shelter, and we'd be okay. We'd have an opportunity to really discharge this tension from our bodies. Now, our bodies and our minds haven't evolved at the same rate as technology, as our society. So while in the past, we'd have to worry about predators and really be afraid for our lives, these days, apart from the concern about the coronavirus, right? Most of us don't really have predators that we need to watch out for. But what's happened is that our businesses, our work, our relationships, our projects have become these predators. And the ego-driven mind is obsessed with problem solving, so it keeps making problems up. And the modern day predator is this persistent sense that something is wrong, which keeps our mind spinning at a really high RPM. Now, this is basically like having a really fast car, right? Imagine your mind is a Ferrari and it's a brand new cherry apple red state-of-the-art car. And it's really fast. And it's a pleasure to drive. Now imagine driving this car with the emergency brake on. How long do you think you'll be able to go before the car breaks down? How good do you think the performance will be of the car as you're driving it with the emergency brake on? Now, having high functioning anxiety is basically like driving a Ferrari with the emergency brake on. At some point, your mind's going to break down, your body's going to break down. So I want to tell you a little bit about where this comes from and what you can do about it. Anxiety really is at its core a perception that something is wrong. It's a perception that there is a problem. Now, often there is no actual problem. The only problem is the perception of a problem. Now, because we've trained our minds to always be scanning our environment for problems, it does that really well. It finds problems. And often, this problem gets directly linked to our survival. So if we don't make a certain amount of money this year, if we don't grow our business to a certain extent, if a team member leaves, if we don't get that contract, if we don't close that client, at some level, our mind thinks that our survival is at risk, because that's how the ego operates. The ego's one job is to keep us alive and to anticipate threats to our survival. So we think that unless our business is a certain way, at a certain place, our bank account has a certain number of zeros, our relationships are this way, the people in our life or in our work act a certain way, we receive a certain amount of attention or response from the people in our life. If things aren't this way, then our well-being is at risk. We basically tie mistakenly all of these external circumstances in our life to our core well-being, because we misunderstand where our well-being comes from. We think us feeling okay is a function of our circumstances. When the circumstances of our life are a certain way, then we are okay. Then we're enough. We're good enough. We're successful enough. And only when the external circumstances are this way or that way can we be at peace. Now, as you can imagine, our life and rarely the world is ever the way we would like it to be. It almost never works like that. And so what happens is that we live in this perpetual sense of not enoughness, where things as they are not okay. When we live in that state, we experience this sense of anxiety. When we confirm the validity of this anxiety, then we get further embedded into it. And so I'm not going to give you 4 steps to this and 3 steps to that, tips, techniques, prescriptions, all the things that you might be looking for at this point in this conversation. Why? Because anything that I would give you would only further confirm, further solidify the sense that there is an actual problem. Instead, I'm going to ask you right now, if right now, as you listen to this, just take a deep breath and ask yourself this: is there really a problem right now? In this present moment, is there a problem? And I'm going to ask you a magical question. What's here now when there's no problem to solve? What's here now, now that there's no problem to solve? And you might experience a space opening up. You might experience a sense of peace flooding in, a state of presence. You might experience your mind just quieting down. Take another deep breath and sink into the space, into the space of peace and presence and calm. Imagine how much more effective and how much more productive you would be if you could live and work from this place, from a sense that everything is okay, everything, including you, are fundamentally okay. That's how we're designed to work better. The mind just works better without that pressure, without that stress. That's how we're designed. So if you want to get better results in business, in life, with a lot less stress, then this is the state that you want to be working from. When we create from this place of okayness, fundamental okayness, then the results that we get are extraordinary. So I want you to practice that a few times today. Just practice coming back into a state of peace, internal peace. Just quieting the mind, calming it down, and freeing yourself from this persistent sense of anxiety, even for a few moments. And if this conversation resonated with you, if you found this useful, then I urge you to join me for the High Performance Mind Intensive that I'll be hosting soon. This is really designed to help you perform at your peak without the stress, while feeling happy and calm and peaceful. So if that's interesting, just click on the link in the show notes, go to the highperformancemind.com and get yourself on the waiting list. So you're the first to know. Spots are limited and I expect this to fill up pretty quickly. So I'd love to see you there so we can interact a little deeper, so I can show you how your mind actually works and how to get the best out of yourself and feel really good at the time, all the time. I hope this was useful. Please share this with someone who you think it could help. Drop a comment. Tell me your experience of this. Tell me what you struggle with so I can create more content that really helps. Thank you. And remember, you are limitless.